Welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask me anything that you like about politics, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the show where you can ask all your questions about politics, and nobody's going to judge you or roast you or make fun of you or try to debate you or anything like that. I know there's a lot of really popular shows out there where Democrats and Republicans call each other names and yell at each other and fight each other and stuff like that. This is not that show. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions about politics. There's no such thing as a dumb question. You can ask me as anything that you like. It could be as simple or as complicated as you like. So long as you're asking in good faith, you will get a good faith response. And everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I am not here to fight you or roast you or argue with you or debate you. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. What's up, JP? Yeah, a bit of a slow start to the day. Zek A says, "Do you think Ukraine is going to win?" I guess it depends on what you mean by winning. Will the war with Russia end at some point? Will Russia stop trying to invade them and annex their territory? Will they give up some territory in exchange for some sort of security guarantee? I don't know, man. It's yeah, that's the kind of prediction that I don't feel anybody is qualified to make. But thanks for your question. Welcome everybody to Ask Me Anything About Politics. What's up, Triska? Great to see you again. Any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat and we will get to answering them. The Majestic Majest says, "Who do you hate more, Trump or Putin?" I don't really hate anybody. I just think that they're both really terrible people. Sager Hansam says, "Do you know any Swedish political parties?" I don't. I am very much not knowledgeable about the government of Sweden. Muzzking and Triska, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. Tan Tai says, "Is Ayatollah Khomeini a good leader?" I don't believe so. I'm pretty sure the Ayatollah was responsible for murdering a bunch of his own citizens. Let's see here. Zek A says, "You can't hate a man who goes to the ice bath." I don't hate anybody, but going to an ice bath doesn't make you a good person. CC Firmer says, "What do you think about the whole Trump Mount Rushmore thing?" I haven't heard that this was an actual conversation that was happening. I only heard people talking about it. Like, obviously, Trump would like this, and it's just an evidence of his own narcissism. Average Joe says, "You look tired or old. A bit of both. I know the feeling." Yeah. I'm not going to say I'm not a tired fella. I'm definitely tired and old fella. Nico Goober says, "What are your opinions on the ballroom Trump is building?" I guess it's kind of like the most obvious example of how out of touch he is with the working class. Like gas prices are rising. People can't afford their health care. People can't find places to live. They can't send their kids to college. And we were involved in a stupid and expensive war in the Middle East. And what is his ultimate focus is building himself a golden ballroom so that him and his rich buddies can have their little tuxedo parties where they dance and they drink champagne while the rest of us are all out there struggling. It should fucking infuriate everybody who's not a billionaire. And even some billionaires, they should be upset about that too. All right, D, good to see you again. Yeah, it was a pretty good appointment. All right, T. Gloff says, "Are you a Democrat or Republican?" I'm a Democrat. Average Joe says, "Are you familiar with the political commentator Sam Harris?" I am aware of Sam Harris. If so, what do you think of his claim that Mamdani is a sinister figure? Seems a little, I mean, I would want to hear the argument, but sounds a little thin to me. JP says, "You forgot billionaires eating caviar 3 times a day." Yeah, sometimes I try to change things up, JP. T. Glove says, "Opinions on Charlie Kirk." Charlie Kirk should not have been assassinated. I am against all kinds of violence, particularly political violence. That being said, Charlie Kirk was a bad guy. He was a liar. He was a con artist. He was a corrupting element in our political discourse. His whole job, bankrolled by the billionaire class, was to go to college campuses and try to convince people that unless you were a right-leaning political voter, then you were stupid. Okay, the Majestic Majest says, do you like Zionism? I don't know what Zionism means. It's the Rocketeer says, pardon me, do you have any Grey Poupon for my caviar? Animal Deck says, how about land distribution in Brazil? Don't know anything about it. Maya says, are you against slave rebellions because you're against political violence? Maya, I just, I know that you can find me examples in history of violence working out, like World War II, for example. Like, I don't think that we're going to vote Hitler out of invading, the Allied forces. But, I think it's just easier and safer to assume that political violence is a bad idea. Okay, Vasil J says, do you think that Serbian regime would fall soon? Oh, I got no idea. Cupcake says, is it important to get into politics? I feel like everything is political these days. I think it's really important to pay attention to politics because who you vote for means, your life can be either easier or harder. And so it's really important to look at who are the politicians that are making our lives better, who are the politicians who are making our lives worse, what is the political platform that is enabling both of those people, both of those, different kinds of people. Big Puppy says, ask me anything. I don't know anything about it multiple times. Okay, dude. Yeah, I never claimed to be omniscient, Big Puppy. Nico Goober says, opinions on the rich people tax Mondani set. I love it. My only criticism is, doesn't go far enough. Tan Tai says, can Trump run for a third term? No. Llama on the Trail says, how are talking about politics and you don't know what Zionism is? Because different people have different definitions of what Zionism is, Llama. Diego Vargas says, why do Dems perform well while Trump is in office, but during Biden we even lost Virginia? So there is a kind of like back and forth thing that happens depending on which political party is in charge. Sometimes the voters will rather have some kind of balance. Like they're worried about one party being too much in control. And so, yeah, I think also when the Democrats are in charge, the billionaire propaganda machine is a little bit more effective because the Democrats are in charge. And so we have an establishment to fight. We have a big brother to fight, and it's the Democrats, and they're evil. And so you should vote for us. We're going to, whatever the Democrats are doing right now, it sucks, right? We all agree the government sucks, All right, thoughts on the Philippine government? Don't know anything about it. Abrao says thoughts on the Brazilian 2026 election? Don't know enough about it. All right, Johnny Ringo says, what are your thoughts on the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact? I am all about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, Johnny Ringo. And if you live in a state that has not already signed up for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, then you should call up your representatives and say, hey, we need to be on the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Let's get rid of the Electoral College. Triska, Muzz King, and Joe, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. So this is not an inclusive list. This is not exhaustive, but I just wrote down a couple of states that have yet to even start the process of signing up for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So if you live in Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, or New Hampshire, just to name a few, call up your state reps and tell them you want to sign up for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Shoeful says, I actually want ranked choice voting more than I want the National Popular Vote. Is that a Tim Robinson reference? Because if so, fucking aces on that. Average Joe says, let's just say he and Bill Maher are politically aligned. Yeah, in that case, fucking thumbs down on that shit. The Majestic Majest says, where do you live, state, city? Right now I reside in Los Angeles, California, but I have lived in Ohio, I have lived in Pennsylvania, I have lived in New York. T-Glove says, thoughts on Keir Starmer? I worry that the UK suffers from the same disease that we suffer from here in America, where the left-wing parties can never do anything right, and the right-wing parties can never do anything wrong. So we judge left-wing parties and left-wing politicians so much harsher than we judge right-wing platforms and policies and politicians. And so, yeah, I'm sure that there's some very accurate criticisms that you can make of Keir Starmer, but I feel like if he was, a Tory party member, he would probably be getting away with some of this shit, Spyrus says, do you link more to the authoritarian or liberal side? Liberal side. Somebody whose name I can't read says, do you believe in communism? I mean, I think there are certain things about the communist philosophy that could be really beneficial, Grimicus says, who knew that getting rid of rat problems in a city famous for its rat problems was part of Sharia law? Yeah, that tracks, Grimicus. That really does track. Okay, let's see here. Hassan Tariq says, what do you think of communism? If communism is giving the workers more power, then I'm for it. Chris McMahon says, Israel or Palestine? I am for the citizens of both of those countries. I am against the governing bodies of both of those countries. Both Netanyahu and Hamas are guilty of war crimes, so 2 thumbs down to both of those guys. Kurtan says, what place do you see religion in politics? It should not be in politics. We should have a separation of church and state. Sam says, what do you think of Scottish independence? If the Scottish people would like that, then I say go for it. Jerry Wren says, what do you know about the Trading with the Enemy Act? I don't know anything about that. Clean Fresh Edit says, what do you think of the Ellisons? I mean, generally speaking, if you are a billionaire, or if you're just a billionaire, but particularly if you are a pro-Trump billionaire, and particularly if you are a pro-Trump billionaire who is trying to monopolize the media, I'm against it. Okay, Justice Sell says, how long after Dumpy Pants is gone before we reverse all his antics? It depends on if we do the work of making sure that we elect enough Democrats to actually give them the power to enact some of those changes. Forget Me Not says, will America win the war? No, 100% not. Cheese says, does Palestine have a right to exist? Yeah, absolutely. Sophilis says, whose project is DJT? I mean, by project, it's kind of like the billionaire project. It's kind of like Russia's project, Coca-Colastic says, can I be left while being socially conservative? I mean, I suppose you can. I don't know why you would. Is there a reason why you think that would be a good thing to do? T-Glove says, my political compass is plus 2.5 left, right, and minus 1 authoritarian. What about you? It looks like you're doing a Dungeons and Dragons chart for your character, for your alignments. Coke-Elastic says, I'm a left based on economics. I mean, you should be left on everything, in my opinion. Y says, which side of the political compass has better economic growth? Democrats, without question. We see this time and time again. For some reason, people have bought the billionaire-funded propaganda that Republican policies are more fiscally responsible, or that there's better economic turnout under Republican governance, and it's just not the case at all. Clean Fresh Edit says, is NIMBYism a problem? Yes. Rat Chef says, how can democracy work if a majority of the voters are nitwit smooth brains? So Rat Chef, who decides who is a nitwit smooth brain and who decides who is a smart person? That is basically the issue. Like, you and I might agree on which voters are the nitwit smooth brains, but I'm sure that some people would call us the nitwit smooth brains, So, yeah, I don't think that we should disparage other voters. I think we just do the work of communicating with our friends and neighbors and coworkers and family members so that we can all get on the same page about what's going on and who would be better to be in charge and who is worse to be in charge. Z Saro says, you can't be socially left and fiscally conservative. It's the fiscal stuff that used to pay for the social safety nets and all of that. I suspect that this dude is doing a bit. This was a joke on 30 Rock, so but I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubts for the time being. Chili Willy, Triska, and Coca-Colastic. Thank you so much for helping me reach my 3rd gift goal of the day, and that means that it is Finger Hearts O'Clock, aka the best time of every day. Alrighty, let's see here. Big Boy Parker says, are there options of holding current officials, cabinet members accountable if all are pardoned. Yes, yes. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you exactly what the avenues are, but I do not believe that the power of Donald Trump to sell presidential pardons to whoever he wants is sort of like written in in stone tablets. I believe that there can be accountability if we do the work of making sure that there is accountability. And that if that means state level charges as opposed to federal charges, if that means passing some legislation to undo certain presidential pardons or remove the presidential pardon power entirely, like, we can do it. Humans can do it. If one human made it, another human can unmake it, and vice versa. Law student says, what's your take on Trump? Incompetent, corrupt, liar, narcissist, racist, fascist. Luis says, do you know Spanish politics? No. Yusef says, was the Holocaust overestimated or underestimated? It depends on who you ask, I guess. But I believe that if you ask a historian, they have a pretty accurate idea of what happened during the Holocaust. Danny says, do you see any hope for the future of humanity? Absolutely. So long as good people like you and me do the work, Danny, there is hope for the future. All right. Someone whose name I can't read says, what do you think of ruling the people in the name of religion? I'm against it. Fernando Fanslau says, in your opinion, which ideology rule the world now and how much forces we have? I mean, the world is kind of a complicated question. Like, obviously, right-leaning billionaires are kind of in a really good position right now as far as like who runs the world. But that can change, and it definitely changes depending on which country or decade you're talking about. Batyudu says, what do you think of Ekrem? I don't know who that person is. Which king of Sebastian says a basic mental health screening required to vote would end the left permanently. So first of all, that's inaccurate. Which king also is not a question, and it's not a very productive thing to do to suggest that half of the voters in this country, more than half of the voters in this country, have something wrong with our noodles. You won't see me doing that here, so maybe you could be a productive part of this instead. Okay, Ratchet says, do you agree with Hezbollah's actions? I'm not an expert in what Hezbollah has or has not done. As far as I am aware, they are a terrorist organization, so I'm not going to, endorse, I'm not going to endorse Hezbollah. Hold on a second. Which king says people that are suicidal shouldn't be included in decision making? It's not productive. So I'm just going to go ahead and block you now. I gave you a chance to be better. Someone whose name I can't read says, what's your opinion on America's occupation of Iraq and the lie about WMDs? I was against it then. I'm against it now. And I'm against Iraq 2.0, a.k.a. Iran, Electric Boogaloo. Ratchet says, what about what they did in 2008? What are you referring to, Ratchet? Tan Tai says, are you all for strict gun control and even gun bans for regular citizens? So I am open to discussions on what is too far regarding gun control regulations. The reason why I'm a Democrat is because I think we should try something. Whereas the Republican Party's philosophy about how to solve gun violence in America is, what are you gonna do? This is just the way it is. This is just the way it is. You gotta have a whole bunch of gun deaths if you want to have a free country, And I don't believe that is a good philosophy. I believe that if you talk to people who have lost children in school shootings, they will tell you that that is unconscionable and that we should try something instead. Ratchet says, what about what Hezbollah did in 2008? I do not know what Hezbollah did in 2008. You're saying this as though I said Hezbollah was good. But do you think Hezbollah did like a good thing in 2008, Ratchet? I don't know what you're referring to. Chaos says, your thoughts on the current U.S. domestic and foreign policies? I mean, it's a fucking nightmare. We have a corrupt and incompetent administration staffed with corrupt and incompetent individuals. It is a might makes right world philosophy where we are embracing dictators and fascists and kicking democracies to the curb. We are insulting all of our allies, going back on all of our agreements, like doing war crimes, starting wars. It's fucking unbelievable, man. It's chaos. Okay. Is there a way I can retrieve it? Yeah, I gotta patch that in Human 2.0. Grimmica says, being wrong never stopped people from believing things. Yes, that is accurate. Let's see here. That sounds like somebody who doesn't know how history goes, relying on charity when we can just take the money and redistribute it. Yes, 100% Z Sero. I recommend the book Winners Take All by Anand Giridharadas about how billionaire charity is a scam. Ratchet says, so basically Hezbollah went down and shot people in Beirut streets for difference of opinion. Yeah, well, I don't like Hezbollah, so, let's see here. Hold on a second. JDND says, what do you think about Mexicans? I am for Mexicans the same way I'm for Americans, the same way I'm for Canadians and the French and the Danish and Israelis and Palestinians. I'm for all of the individual citizens. Chaos says, thoughts on healthcare and housing industries because of this administration? Worse. They are worse. They are more expensive. Chaos. Fear Hevia says, did you saw Spain's mass immigrants regulation? What do you think? I have not seen that. I'm a little surprised to hear that that's a thing, just because I have been reading sporadically about the government of Spain, and it seems like they're pretty progressive, and so I think there's probably like a backlash to like massive tourism and extractive tourism. So yeah, I would need to look a little bit more into that. Chaos says, do you think it's possible to get either free healthcare or at least more affordable? Oh, yeah, absolutely, Chaos. 100%. You've got to be kidding, says, why are MAGA politically ignorant? So I don't love the phrasing there. Who was it that just asked that question? Racked, please stop spamming the comments. You've got to be kidding. I don't love the phrasing there, because there are some people who are in the MAGA movement who are not ignorant. There are some people who are really, really shitty people who are in the MAGA movement. They know exactly what they're doing. And then there are certain people who are perfectly nice and very intelligent, but they have grown up and lived in an information silo for their entire lives, and it's really difficult to break out of those. Okay, Average Joe says, well, I believe charities are important. Solely relying on them for social safety nets is naive. It assumes the wealthy wants to give it, and it assumes everyone else can afford to give. Charity is necessary for the handling of local issues, but logistically it can't functionally operate on a national scale the way government can. I'm down with all these arguments, Grimacus and Average Joe, but I think it's just kind of simpler. I just don't think that we should be hoping and praying that our billionaire fucking kings and queens are the benevolent kind instead of the shitty kind, All right, the Majestic Majestic, thoughts on Netanyahu? War criminal, piece of shit, gotta go. Chaos says, do you think the files will be released anytime soon? No. The Trump administration has been blocking that for a really long time and redacting information that shouldn't be redacted and releasing information that shouldn't be released. I think that the only way that we are going to see the information that we want to see from those files is by voting every Republican out of office and replacing them with a Democrat. Ciao says, is there any possible solution for Brazil? Absolutely, but I don't know what you're referring to. IDG says, what do you think about the president of Brazil? Don't know enough about them to say. Ratchet says, your opinion on Trump's way of handling negotiations of diplomatic relations with other countries? Terrible. Terrible. Could not be worse. It is unresearched, poorly planned, self-dealing, does not have to do anything with the interest of the citizens of either country. It is just about what puts money in his pockets. BD9 says, every Democratic on here think they're the smartest people alive. They think their way or no way. So it's difficult for me to take this comment seriously, BD9, because your spelling is bad. And so, you're saying that we think we're the smartest people alive, and meanwhile, you're using the wrong there, But then you use the right there, So it's like you can do it, But yeah. I don't buy the argument that people on the left are condescending or that they think that they're smarter than everybody else. Okay, let's see here. Average Joe says, do you feel that groups like Hamas and Hezbollah commit violence for the sake of violence, or do you see their existence as a result of U.S. and Israeli imperialism? I mean, I think an argument could be made that terrorist organizations exist because powerful nations force them to exist. However, you can't really account for the individual motivations of every person in a terrorist organization, depending on who is leading that organization. Like, are they really there to fight for freedom for people that, are part of the same culture as them, or do they just really like being in charge of a militant terrorist organization? It's a little dicey, in my opinion, to assume that terrorist organizations are just, they're just freedom fighters, because I don't think that you do war crimes if you have, purely good intentions. Chaos says, do you think there will be a draft, and also thoughts on the tariff refunds? The tariff refunds most likely are just going to be going to businesses and rich people. So we're all kind of fucked on that, unless you're one of those. Do I think there will be a draft? I think it's unlikely, but it's definitely possible. Okay, the Majestic Majestic's opinion on Kim Jong-un. I'm against him. Someone whose name I can't read says, what do you think about Central Asia? I don't know enough about the politics to discuss it, but, I'm sure the people there are great. Spire says, do you think countries choose China as their main trading partner because of Trump? I think it's a bunch of things, but I definitely think that Trump has pushed people who would have traded with America into the arms of China. Milad says, is politics just a trouble? Because no matter the side you're on, they're both bad. So that is inaccurate, Milad. There are better politicians and worse politicians. There are better political parties and worse political parties. There are politicians who are more corrupt and politicians who are less corrupt. So to say they're both bad is it's sort of like a tactic that people will use to try to de-incentivize people from voting, to depress voter turnout. And I just don't buy that at all. There are wildly different outcomes depending on who is in charge, whether it's at the state or federal level. So, anybody who's trying to tell you that both sides are the same or equally bad is lying to you. All right, Milad says, like, I'm independent. I used to lean political. I stopped because of controversy. That sounds a little sus, Milad. All right. Oh, yes, says, opinion on the Green Party, UK. So I don't know a ton about it because I don't live in the UK, but I've read a little bit, and it seems like the Green Party in the UK is doing things well and is in a good position to actually start winning some elections and be a good left-wing force in the UK. That's very different than the Green Party here in America, which is just complete bullshit. Spoiler candidates, ego-driven cash grab candidates. Jill Stein, probably an agent of the Russian government, shit like that. Dan Blackroyd says it also excuses voting for nefarious actors because if everybody's bad, then nobody's bad. It's toxic. 100%. Dan Blackroyd does not miss. Malad says, which side do you lean? I'm a progressive Democrat. The Majestic Majest, I answered that. Kim Jong-un is a violent dictator. I do not support. I do not endorse. Let's see here. Money emoji says, how do you feel about every politician and political party being controlled and PDFs? Well, that's not real. It's not a real thing. Like, not every politician and political party is being controlled, and they're not all, PDFs. So, I think that when you say that, you're kind of giving cover for people in the Trump administration who are currently blocking information from coming out about the Epstein files. So, all right. So money emoji says, except it is though. All right. So you are in question jail. You either ask a question or you're out of here, because I don't appreciate it when people take the things that I'm saying that are accurate and saying that they are not accurate. Comrade Kosi says, what do you think about cosmopolitanism? I don't know how you define it. Apostolic says, I think communists and fascists should be scared to hold their views in America. I know they shouldn't. You should be able to hold whatever views you want in America. That's freedom of speech. Fear Hevia says, what do you think about Europe mass illegal immigration because Spain just regulated 500,000? I got to be honest, there's a lot of misinformation out there about immigrants in Europe right now, so I have to dip on this because I don't know if what you're saying is accurate. Fear Hevia. All right, money emoji says, proof they aren't because I've said every one of them are and never defended Trump. Weird. Well, I don't know, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Mamdani, they're not owned or PDFs, right? So that's not all of them, right? Money emojis? You are sus as hell, man. All right, scrolling down the bottom. Spider Kev says, thoughts on Trump? Corrupt, incompetent, racist, fascist, narcissistic, liar, etc. All right, someone whose name I can't read says, do you think Iran and the U.S. will agree? I don't know, but it's possible. Oh yes, says, in your opinion, what's better, social liberalism or social democracy? I seems like a difference, a distinction without a difference. You know, the Majestic's opinion on China in general. China has done incredible things. They're beautiful cities, incredible people. The government of China is very repressive, and they are guilty of human rights violations. So yeah, there we go. All right. Ooh, okay. Hold on a second. Average Joe says, do you know that the term terrorist organization is subjective, determined by individual states, and by definition, it can't be applied to nation states, even if they double tap schools and hospitals? That tracks for me, Average Joe. But people that I trust. I mean, I am not using the term terrorist organization to mean that this group is definitely doing worse things than like the current, American government and shit like that. But yeah, I definitely think that if you're killing innocent civilians, then you're bad. Felipe Naranjo says, your thoughts on Gustavo Petro in Colombia? Don't know enough about him to say anything. Europe says, if you were to pick Xavier Becerra or Ramsey Robinson, I mean, Becerra, is it Becerra or Becerra? I don't know. But Becerra is, at least, he's polling really well. So Ramsey's got to drop out because Ramsey's not even in the fucking top 5 or 10 or anything. Oh, yes, says, do you think Israel has the right to exist? I think Israel has the right to exist the same way that America has the right to exist, and Canada and Palestine and Iran and Italy, etc. Comrade Koski says, how do you feel about communism? If communism is workers under the means of production, then I'm for it. Spider Kev says, what do you think of people shoehorning Israel in every aspect of politics? I think that there are good faith reasons to be focused on Israel, considering the mass fuckery that they are currently up to, and the fact that our country, America, with its current government, is continuing to send them money and weapons so that they can continue to do their fucking barbaric war crimes and G-side adjacent activities. But it is also a mechanism that anti-Semites use in order to convince people to be anti-Semitic with them. And so we have to be aware of this. We have to be aware that people are using some of these very accurate criticisms of the current Israeli government to shoehorn their anti-Semitic beliefs into popular culture. But that does not mean that criticizing Netanyahu or the actions of the Israeli government is itself anti-Semitic. Kibit Karid says, how do you feel about Hillary Clinton? Hillary Clinton was fine. I thought she would have been a great president. Chaos says, would you say both the left and right are owned by Israel, or is one owned more than the other? Well, let's just look at the votes. Chaos. Right now, I believe it's 80% of the Democrats in the Senate have voted against sending more money and weapons to Israel. The Trump administration has removed sanctions against illegal West Bank settlements. They continue to send them 2,000-pound bombs where the Biden administration stopped them from sending 2,000-pound bombs. Every single Republican, save for Thomas Massie, is a consistent yes vote on sending more money and weapons to Israel. If you're looking for the politicians that stand up to Israel or do not take AIPAC money, they are all in the Democratic Party. So that should answer your question, in my opinion. Arongak says, what do you think about Mamdani? I think he's great. Bram Z says, any advice for anyone who wants to join politics? So first of all, I would just say try to be a regular news consumer. Avoid right-wing news because we have a lot of data showing that it is the least accurate news that you can get. If you want to work in politics, I would say find a politician that you like and volunteer for their campaign, and then try to get more involved if you can. Arongak, I already answered that question about Mamdani. I like him. Mihu says, what do you think about Antifa? I mean, Antifa stands for anti-fascist. We should all be anti-fascist. But there's no group Antifa for me to talk about. Like, there's no leadership, Ryan Doc says, Democrats and Republicans are just two sides of the same Israeli coin. That is inaccurate, Ryan Doc. Would you like me to tell you why it's inaccurate? Or are you just here to spread that false narrative? David says, Jared, do you believe in hell? No. Chaos says, how do you think we can remove AIPAC influence or any Zionist influence? So we all need to do the work of making sure that AIPAC is not successful in electing American politicians, because AIPAC is very good at that, and they have been for a long time. Like, there are a lot of progressive Democrats who have lost their elections because they tried to stand up to AIPAC. Now, why did that happen? That happened because people bought the bullshit that AIPAC was selling them. So if AIPAC is trying to get you vote for this politician because they don't like the other politician is standing up to them, then vote for not the AIPAC politician. It's pretty simple. Now, there is a big difference, though, between voting in the primary and voting in the general. When you have in the general two candidates who are both, who have both accepted AIPAC money, you have to think like, all right, well, the Republican Party has way more politicians in it that are on the take for AIPAC, and the Democratic Party has way fewer. And so maybe if I vote for this AIPAC aligned Democrat, they will at least give more power to Democrats like AOC and Bernie Sanders, who are standing up to Israel and AIPAC. Okay, let's see here. Mihu says, should Israel be a U.S. ally? Every country should be a U.S. ally. Chaos says, Zionists understand this is the last administration they can have a firm hold on, potentially, but if, people don't replace the Republicans in office with Democrats, then, the Israeli government will continue to be able to do whatever the fuck they want. Okay, Roadmaster says, Track AIPAC has been recently found to have been lying about their numbers and manipulating it. I did see that, Roadmaster. That is accurate. 100%. Let's see here. Average Joe, I have no issue calling the U.S. a terrorist nation. I just think it's important to have that knowledge when discussing the topic with people who view acts of terrorism in a bubble. I think that's accurate, Average Joe. I think the difference is anybody here a good guy, or are there just different levels of bad guy? Triska, Kate the Grateful, and Muzz King, thank you so much for helping me reach my first Finger Hearts goal of the day. Commie Scum says opinions on the DPRK. Is that the Democratic something? I don't know what DPRK is. Okay. A is sending me love from the Gonorrhean Galaxy. You can keep that love. You should send that love to the antibiotics system. Kami Sums says opinions on North Korea. Violent dictatorship that starves its people. Thumbs down. Malad says, when you ask a Republican, Israel or America, why are they scared to answer it in videos? So there are probably good faith reasons for that, Malad, but there's also bad faith reasons. So good faith reasons would be that I don't think that we should be saying America first at all. We do better as a country when other countries do better as well. So if somebody's trying to make the America First argument and then they are saying that it's a good thing that we defund USAID because America First, that doesn't track for me. Like, I can't get on board with that kind of thing. But if you're saying America First, like, let's stop sending money and weapons to Israel where they have universal health care and we, for some reason, can't fucking afford it, like, yeah, sure, I'm down with that argument. Now, there are definitely Republican candidates who are worried about the political influence of Israel and AIPAC, and so they are probably worried about losing funding or losing their reelection if they say anything that can be construed as anti-AIPAC or anti-Netanyahu. Commie Scum says opinion on Xi Jinping. Dictator, president for life, human rights violations, not a great guy. Sam says, why are there so many correlations now to Nazi era rise of the far right? I think it's because those people never really went away. They just kind of like taught the next generation, like, these are our beliefs and we have to be quiet about it right now because it's really not cool. We have to use code words and dog whistles. But once we are able to get back into power, then we should do all the shit that we were doing before. And hopefully we can fucking cross the finish line where we weren't able to in the 1930s and 40s. All right, Chaos says, did you hear about the Florida girl felony charges? Oh, no, I have no idea what that is. Period. You can either ask a question or leave, period. All right. Commie Scum says, what? Xi is far better than American politicians. So Commie Scum, I think there's a trap here in trying to suggest that an authoritarian dictator in China is somehow better than the democratically elected president who is trying to be a fascist and an authoritarian, Like, is Xi a better leader than Trump? I mean, they're both bad people who have done really bad things to their own citizens and to, neighboring countries. If you really think that Xi Jinping's a good guy, like, ask him about Tiananmen Square and see how he fucking feels about that. Let's see here. Period says Xi is better than Trump and objectively smarter. I mean, the stuff I scrape off of the bottom of my shoe is smarter than Trump. Chaos says the Florida girl said bad stuff about Netanyahu on a group chat, and now she faces felony charges. Well, I don't care for that, Chaos. Ronaldino says, hello, what about Turkmenistan? Don't know anything about it. Mihu says, what should be the U.S. relations with China? I believe that there should be some targeted restrictions, but that we only shoot ourselves in the foot by having a maximalist position about it. And so obviously trade issues are going to be extremely complicated where you have like over 200 countries all trying to work out trade arrangements within each other. But yeah, like it is accurate to say that China is a bad faith partner on the, in the global trade world. So we should do things about that, but it would be cutting off our nose to spite our face if we just had a maximalist anti-China position. Okay, Average Joe says, can I plug a congressional candidate? Absolutely, Average Joe. Triska says, do you think the new Fed chair will be confirmed, and what does that mean for our economy? I have not read up about the new Fed chair at all yet, Triska. I am worried if it's a Trump pick, then obviously that is going to be an issue. That is going to spike inflation like crazy. So yeah, we got to be worried about that. Commie Scum says Tiananmen Square protest was heavily funded by the CIA to overthrow China. I'm just going to go ahead and block you now. It doesn't seem like you are a good guy here. SAI says, who will be the main reason for World War III? If it happens, it's Trump. Full stop. Malad says, the United States should impeach Trump due to ICE wars and the files and terrorists and corruption. Oh, yeah, 100%. Trump's done 1,000 impeachable things. Mihu says, what do you think about free speech? I'm for it. Chaos says, do you think both Trump and Netanyahu is the modern day Hitler? I mean, I think that there's a lot of similarities that you can point to with those three fellas. But I think it might be hyperbolic to say my modern day Hitler. Okay, DJ says, is Trump a dictator? He's trying to be. I would say he's probably been like 60% successful in turning his presidency into a dictatorship. But 60% successful is not 100% successful, which means that we still have the ability to remove him from office. Okay. In My Homie says, does Israel run the world? No. Grimicus says, in Germany, it's a criminal offense to call someone a fascist or Nazi when it is not factually supported enough to be defended in court. The German press has been calling Trump and his people fascist Nazis for over a year. No arrests made. Ooh, that's interesting, Grimicus. I would want to dig into that because that seems a little too good to be true, in my opinion. But, no lies detected as far as I can tell. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for all of the questions and comments so far. Hoger says, how to become a dictator in a third world country that's in a lot of corruption. I mean, don't become a dictator. Don't be a dictator. Be a democratically elected leader. Way better. Canadian Conservative says, UN is corrupt. I do not believe that is accurate, Canadian Conservative. Average Joe is plugging a progressive candidate who is running in the Texas District 05 named Chelsea Hockett. And the primary election is next month. Chelsea Hockett seems dope as hell. Thank you for the plug, Average Joe. So if you live in Texas's 5th congressional district, vote for Chelsea Hockett in the primary. Everybody get out there and vote in the primary. Primary voting is extremely important. Kate the Grateful, Triska, and Aaron, thank you so much for helping me reach my 3rd Finger Hearts goal of the day. What's up, Lauren? Great to see you again. Young Marxist Collective says, what do you think about Karl Marx? I think the workers should own the means of production. Jimmy Toronto says, what's your view on CUSMA and U.S. relations with Canada? Obviously, Trump has sort of ruined our relationship with Canada for the time being. Hopefully, we can get new leadership in to fix that relationship. Joel T says, thoughts on Trump getting his face on Mount Rushmore? That would be a pretty ridiculous thing to happen. I am not for it. DJ says, is the U.S. always the good guy? No, 100% not. I think there are just things that have happened this year that prove that that America is not always the good guy. Max Hook says, if you could replace the U.S. electoral system, what would you replace it with? I don't know if I would replace it with anything, but I'd definitely change it. You know, get rid of the electoral college, rebalance the Senate map, add seats to the House, partisan gerrymandering illegal, money out of politics. You know, there's a lot of electoral reforms that I think could benefit America. DC statehood, state of Puerto Rico. DJBC says, is capitalism the answer? I mean, I don't think so. I think that it's the answer if your question is, why is everything suck right now? All right, Malad says, you think anyone supports Trump needs to get professional help? Not necessarily. I think there's some perfectly nice and smart people who just got tricked or are too firmly in their information environment in order to get out of it. SAI says, not politics, but do you think there's a cure for cancer? Yeah, probably. USX says, what do you think of fractional autocracy? I don't really know. This is my first time hearing that expression, so I don't know what to say about it. Hogger says, what do you think about minorities that want to have independence? What's the best way? I mean, I guess I would need more specifics, Hogger. Like, what exactly are you referencing? Yaman says, what do you think about Erdogan? I don't remember everything about Erdogan. If I'm remembering correctly, he's a bad guy. He's the dude that used to run Syria, right? And then he got ousted and he had to go hide in Russia, right? That's Erdogan. GI says, what you think about, and then looks like a shopping bag emoji. I don't know what that's supposed to be. Willie Billy says, what are your thoughts on HR 5704? Can you tell me what that bill is? Because I don't have all these bills memorized. DJ says, is Israel committing a G-side in your opinion? So my opinion on whether or not Israel is doing a G-side does not matter because I am not an expert in what is or is not a G-side. But you know who is an expert in what is or isn't a G-side is international organizations that whose entire job is to figure out if certain countries are doing a G-side. And there are independent organizations within Israel whose job it is to decide what is and what isn't a G-side. And pretty much all of those organizations have said that this is a G-side. So I feel pretty confident saying it's a G-side. User a whole bunch of numbers says, what's your ideal ideology? Progressive Democrats. Yaman says, no, that's Assad. You said Erdogan. Turkey's president. Yes, sorry. Assad. Yes, Assad was Syria, wasn't he? Yeah, sorry. I don't know too much about Erdogan. He doesn't say, if I'm remembering correctly, he's not a good guy, but I don't really remember. Sergio Garcia says, this is a flex to have never taken a vaccine, in my opinion. I mean, it's very selfish to never have taken a vaccine, Sergio Garcia. You are making it possible for diseases to spread, mutate, become worse, kill a bunch of elderly people and children, you know? So, yeah, I don't think it's a flex. I think that it is evidence of being an extremely selfish person. Guy says, Mark Carney thoughts. He seems to be doing a really good job these days. At least messaging. He's doing a great job. Grimmica says, DJT's face is already represented at Rushmore. It's the garbage and rubble that got left at the base of the mountain. That's pretty funny. Let's see here. Lost Convict says, how do you feel about nuking the filibuster? I think that we need the filibuster right now to stop Trump from doing all the really shitty shit that he wants to do. But after Trump is gone, I say get rid of the filibuster. Fucking get rid of it. I think it is sort of like the bumpers when you're playing, you know, when you're bowling, the bumpers in the alleys that allow there not to be real consequences depending on who is in charge. And I'm like, let people see what it is like when Democrats run things without having to worry about the filibuster. Let people see what it's like when Republicans run things without having to worry about the filibuster. Gia says, do you hate Hamas? I mean, Hamas is guilty of war crimes. Netanyahu is guilty of war crimes. I don't like either of them. And yes, Suyal, Netanyahu is a war criminal. Alvarez says, why do governments take out people who find any cure for cancer? I don't know if that has happened, Alvarez. I would not be surprised if there was evidence that that happened, but I don't think that there is evidence that that happened. Holger says, "What's the best system for a new country?" I mean, I would go with the Nordic model. They seem to really have their finger on the pulse over there. Dallydoo says, "Was it 6 million or 271,000?" I don't know what you are referring to with those numbers. Willie Billy says, "It's a bill to cancel Obama's Smith-Mundt Moderation Act and no longer allow government propaganda." I would need to look into that a little bit more. Willie Billy, I am extremely skeptical of Republicans trying to undo things that Obama has done. Every time they do, it seems like we get fucked. Okay. Oh, you're talking about the Holocaust. All right. Anybody saying that there were not millions of Jews killed during the Holocaust is an automatic block, guys. Just want to let you know. And Texas, what's your opinion about Mark Carney? Seems like he's doing a good job to me. Shane says, "How do you feel about income tax? We should raise taxes on the billionaire and eliminate income tax for everybody in the working class." Willie Billy says, 2009 Democrats, they had the supermajority and beat any filibuster requirements. Yeah, but look at what was necessary to make that happen, Willie Billy. Like, the Republican Party had to fuck up so hard for so long. Forever wars, Katrina, financial crisis, and even then, the Democrats only had that supermajority for about 8 months. And then they lost it. Hold on a second. Gotta go block this person here. Right. You will not be missed. So yeah, I do not believe that we should allow the Republican Party to make mistakes of that caliber over and over and over again, just so that Democrats can have a filibuster-proof majority for 8 months. I don't think that's a good, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. DJ says, "Who did 9/11? Osama bin Laden." Lost Comic says, "Do you agree on taxing unrealized gains?" Yes, but I am not dogmatic about it. We need to figure out a way to make it so that the billionaire class is not hoarding resources. And if taxing unrealized gains is the way of making that happen, then I say fucking great. Let's look into it. Let's do it. And long story short, the rich have too much, the poor have too little. And we need to do things to solve that. And however you decide to tax the rich, just fucking get it done. Use that money to make everybody else's lives better. Let's regulate their businesses so that people aren't, working 40 hours a week and can't afford food or medicine or housing or to send their kids to college. Let's fix that fucking problem. And whether that's taxing unrealized gains or the pied-à-terre tax that Mamdani is proposing, or eliminating income tax for people making under 70K, like Cory Booker is proposing, let's do all of that and more to fix this fucking problem. DJBC says, "How should we solve homelessness in New York?" Tax the rich. Tax the rich. Tax the pied-à-terres. No more stashing money in, $50 billion condos that nobody's living in. Build more houses. Get rid of Airbnbs. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. All right, Dallydoo says, "Agree that rich should be taxed, but the money isn't helping America whatsoever. Trump spent $11 billion and more on the war. Your taxes is going straight to Trump's wallet, bro. I'm Native American, mind you." Okay, Dallydoo. Well then, as a non-American, let me tell you a little bit more about how politics works in America. Depending on who is in charge, tax dollars can get allocated to different organizations or projects. And so right now we have Trump in charge of the government. The Republican Party is in charge of Congress. Radical right-wing extremists are in charge of the judiciary. And so they are able to cut taxes for the very wealthy and take what little money is left over and give it to ICE, give it to the military, and put it in Trump's pocket and his billionaire buddies as well. But that is not always the case. And yes, you can show me examples of Democratic presidents not doing great things with our tax dollars, but it is way, 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 way better when Democrats are in charge. What's up, Droid Man? Hello, Nebraska. I fucking love Nebraska. I have never had a bad meal in Omaha. Costro says, "Why hasn't the Philippine vice president been impeached yet?" I have no idea. DJ says, do you believe in conspiracy theories? Only one. RFK Jr. doesn't really sound like that. Ear says, what are your thoughts on Ekrem arrest in Turkey? I don't know anything about that, unfortunately. The Majestic Majest says, your opinion on the U.S. involvement in the war in Iraq in the 1990s? It's a little over my head. You know, I think I'm, generally speaking, I am against American interventionism in the Middle East. You know, no blood for oil kind of shit. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a more nuanced take than that. Z Saro says, what do you think RFK really sounds like? Hey, he's got a beautiful, melodious voice. Like he's like a fucking Mel Torme, but then when he gets in front of the cameras, he does that fake voice. Dallydoo says, wait, are you a Trump supporter? No, very much not, Dallydoo. I don't know how you could look at the things that I just said and assume that I was. R says, do you agree with what Israel and Trump are doing in the Middle East? No, very much not. Okay, Aki says, what do you think of our president, Giorgia Meloni? I don't know too much about him. If I'm remembering correctly, he's not a good guy, but I don't really remember. DJ says, does Israel start offensive wars? Yes. Noor says, what do you think about Hezbollah, Israel, and do you think Hezbollah is wrong or right? So where I come down on Israel, the government of Israel, and Hamas and Hezbollah is there's no good people in that group. If you do war crimes, if you punish civilians for the actions of a government or an organization, then you're a bad guy. So Netanyahu, bad. Hezbollah, bad. Hamas, bad. Ludwig says, do you support Trump? No, I do not. Doodoo says, what do you think about Bolsonaro? God, I don't remember Bolsonaro. Was he Jair Bolsonaro? Yeah, I don't remember. Sorry. Okay. Dallydoo says, Ivan the UA bro, it's trenches out here, man. Fix your president. I'm doing my fucking best, Dallydoo. If you live in the fucking UAE, you can probably afford to throw me some fucking gifts and encourage me to keep doing this, man. But I'm here fucking 5 days a week trying to convince people to stop voting for Republicans, man. Okay, Carmine says, opinion on Popeye's biscuits. Ooh, yeah, I fucking love me some Popeyes. Noor says, do you Lebanon-Israel peace deal going to work in Lebanon? I have no idea. Yeah, I got no idea. I hope so, but I have no fucking idea. Mark Alex says, did you watch Melania's documentary? No, I am against self-harm. Alixo says, what's your opinion on Polish politics? I don't know nearly enough about it to comment. Okay. MOH says, bro, ceasefire will end in 30 minutes, I believe. I'm pretty sure it ended. Didn't it end? The Strait of Hormuz, they reclosed it and everything, right? But I got no idea, man. This thing's a real fucking moving target. It changes from second to second, you know? And you can't fucking trust the president or the Department of Defense to tell you what the fuck's going on because they're fucking liars, you know? All right. Misty Lane says, did you know 80% of Democrats don't support the actions of Israel? And if you are thinking about trying to appeal to young Republicans, 51% of young Republicans under 50 do not support Israel. I did know that, Misty Lane. Did you know that 80% of the Democrats in the Senate voted against sending more money and weapons to Israel? It seems as though the Democratic Party is a lot better on this issue than the Republican Party, Misty Lane. Do you not think so? Aki says, do you think the EU is bullshit? No. DJ says, what major policy from Biden that you really liked? Inflation Reduction Act. The inflation that was caused by Trump that peaked at 9% was brought back down to 2.4% thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. And also in that bill was the largest investment in green energy in our nation's history. At peak, we were printing a nuclear power plant's worth of solar panels a day. Small towns were being revitalized with safe, good-paying, clean energy jobs. That was an incredible bill. It should have given Democrats the presidency and the majority in Congress for the next 5 election cycles, but people don't really give a shit about good things that the government does. They just want to focus on the bad things that Democrats do and then ignore the bad things that Republicans do. Missy Lane, so what is the thought process behind some people like Chuck Schumer? So that's a really good question, Missy Lane. And here's the thing. I can tell you some theories that I have. There are good faith theories and there are bad faith theories. I don't think trying to parse what is actually going on there is as productive as we would want it to be. So instead, here's what I would say. I would say, let's admit we don't know why Chuck Schumer is doing something, even if we can agree that what he is doing is stupid and immoral. What we can do is try to primary him. We can call our representatives and say, we want a different Senate leader for the Democrats, and we want it yesterday. And we got to vote for more politicians who stand up to Israel and AIPAC. More progressives. The kind of progressives that Chuck Schumer seems really invested in trying to not get elected for one reason or the other, whatever those reasons might be. Let's elect those Democrats. And here's the other thing. Republicans winning elections helps people like Chuck Schumer, because it makes it clear that the country is more right-wing than left-wing. And so Chuck Schumer is able to go to his base and go, look, I would love to support a candidate like Mamdani, but look at how many more votes Trump got in New York in 2024 than he did in 2020 or even 2016. So you can't tell me that this is the time to be supporting progressive candidates. So yeah, voting for a centrist Democrat over a Republican helps the progressive wing more than it helps the centrist wing. Alrighty. Yes, Misty Lane, that is accurate. Okay. Bayou Blanc. I don't know why you think laughing at me for saying more progressives. And immediately pivots to using Israel hate. You can go through every second of my live streams for over the past year, Bayou Blanc, and you will never see me saying a negative thing about the country Israel, the people Israel. I have a lot of mean things to say about the government in Israel and Netanyahu specifically. Do you think that me criticizing Netanyahu is synonymous with criticizing Israel, Bayou Blanc? I'm just saying, comments are a little slow right now, so I don't really mind pulling on this thread. I don't really like people getting away with thinking that they just fucking dunked on me, when all they said was things that were wildly inaccurate. So, alrighty. Ohana's Burger says, bro, when will the Hormuz open up realistically? I've got no fucking idea, man. SX says, do you support ICE? No, I do not. Virginia, if you live in Virginia, go out and vote today. Thank you, Grace, for reminding everybody. Noor says, what will the terms of the ceasefire be now at the end of the negotiation? I have no fucking idea, Noor. Nobody does. Let's see here. And Joey says, what do you think of an LVT soul tax system? I don't know what LVT stands for, and Joey. As Boel says, AIPAC is devil, ? I don't think they're the devil, but I definitely think that they are a bad organization that supports bad politicians. And they use American billionaire dollars to try to get right-wing people elected, who then allow Israel to do war crimes and genocide. Okay. I'm going to start wrapping things up, everybody. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, DMs are open. You can email me through my website, or you can hit me up on my Discord. Links to all that stuff is in the bio. DJ says, do Republicans believe in America first or Israel first? It depends on who you're talking about, because people in the Republican base are America first, but the Republican elected politicians who are currently in charge of the American government are clearly Israel first. Alrighty. Daniel says, why does Israel have so much control and power over the U.S.? There's a lot of theories to that, Daniel. I'll just throw you out a couple. It's a very valuable partner to have in the Middle East for military actions. It's possible that they have blackmail material on American politicians. They are very good at losing American politicians their elections. The road is littered with the bodies of of progressive Democrats who tried to stand up to AIPAC. AIPAC is an extremely well-funded lobbying organization that can lose you your election if you get in their crosshairs. Okay. Dono says, what do you think about Mexico's current president? She's dope as hell. I wish we could switch. All right. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we're all struggling financially, but if you have the dollars and you want to give them to me because you think that what I'm doing here is a boon for the world and for political discourse, then there are mechanisms by which you can donate to my channel. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free. Costs you $0, helps me out a ton. You can also join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Special shout out to all of my regular contributors: Muzzking, Pliff, Average Joe, It's the Rocketeer, Lauren Triska, The Two Seans, D, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. If you would like your name to be read at the end of my live streams when I remember to do it, then be a Twitch subscriber, be a TikTok superfan, or join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Let's see here. Discord is a great resource, great community there. There's suggestions for civic action you can take and organizations for you to join. Because us doing the work is the only way that we get out of this fucking shit. We can have a better country. We don't have to fucking live like this, guys. And I guarantee you we can have a better life if we just have better people in charge. There are good people in the government still. There are good people in the Department of Justice still. But they are too few. And they have too little power. And they have too little resources. So they need our help. So we got to do the work. And if we do the work, then we win. All right, everybody, I'm going to get out of here. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye.